And Congressman, thank you for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Kelsey. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for giving me this chance to speak. And I want to save the bulk of our time for dialogue or questions that people may have. Obviously, with Dr. King, Martin Luther King's Day tomorrow, the urgent question that everyone has is voting rights. I've been very, very critical of Senator Sinema. I asked hypothetically in media interviews if we could have passed the 1964 the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act with 51 votes. And Senator Sinema was in the Senate at that time, which he really have said that, no, I'm going to vote no, and that we need to get 60 votes to make sure that there's desegregation, to make sure that Black people could vote in this country. That is really what she is saying, that it takes 60 votes even for something that has moral urgency, that's a fundamental right. And I just don't think that's a consistent question. And then the question for her really is, where is the line? Is there any line of morality, of fundamental rights, which you would stand up for? So this is not a lost cause. I was just talking to John Sarbanes, the leader of the effort in the House, and he's saying that they're going to have a full week of debate and trying to convince. There's a full steam effort on Sinema and Manchin. It's still a long shot. They haven't moved yet, but I'm going to continue to advocate for that to make sure we get this done. And now, separate from that, we have to have the Electoral Count Act reform, where Donald Trump literally can come vote, be the nominee, lose Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and still have the Republican state legislatures overturn that and send Republican slates. That Electoral Count Act has to be amended, and that is what Klobuchar, Durbin, and King are doing. But the Republicans are using a head fake to say, oh, we may be for that. We'll see if they actually are, to distract us from voting rights. So first, we've got to get the voting rights done. Then we have to get the Electoral Count Act reform. That's the highest priority. I don't know if you saw Senator Sanders. I share some of his frustrations that we have departed from delivering on a working class agenda. The $15 minimum wage, we've been demanding a vote. We need to make sure we actually are getting dental, hearing, and vision. I mean, that wasn't even part of the framework. We need to do that. We need to make sure Build Back Better in some form passes. I mean, it would be a disaster to not have the $500 billion on climate. It would be a huge miss to not have universal preschool. It would be cruel to take away the child tax credits at this moment with Omicron from working families, and they've lost that child tax credit expansion starting January. So look, the reality is we need 51 votes in the Senate. I've said we ought to be open to compromise to get something as opposed to nothing. But right now, there's not even a sense of whether we're going to get something. So we've got to figure out how do we get things done. I mean, Sanders has a great op-ed in The Guardian. You know, why can't we get prescription drug prices to be negotiated? That's something we run on every time. Why can't we get the $15 wage? Why can't we make sure we're expanding the child tax credit? Why can't we finally pass the PRO Act with union legislation, or at least get a vote on that? Why can't we get dental, vision, hearing, basic benefits for our seniors that they currently don't have them, and expand Medicare? So I am, along with other progressives, fighting for that, making the point that we're losing the trust of a lot of working class Americans if we're not actually delivering on this, and we have to get something done. So voting rights, getting something on it, the Build Back Better, getting individual bills on a working class agenda. And then finally, I've been pushing on the Innovation Competition Act. That would create the opportunity for billions of dollars in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing in the US. We ought to be making the semiconductors, the print boards, the clean technology in America, not in China. We ought to be investing in domestic manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, building new factories, building new technology outputs that are creating good jobs in this country. And that bill has passed the Senate. I'm hoping it will pass the House. So that has been a lot of my activity. I have a book coming out on January 31st, Dignity in a Digital Age, and we'll be doing a media tour on Colbert and Bill Maher and some of the others, and then hope to be back in the district in person after Omicron. Obviously, it's tough remote, but I hope everyone is keeping safe. We've got young kids, so still waiting on their vaccinations. I'm told, and I'm hopeful that for those who have young kids, we may see something in February. And we just need to get past Omicron. Sanders and I have pushed for getting 3 masks and 95 masks to everyone. I'm told I had a senior White House person call me on Friday. They're going to be doing something in the next 2 weeks. They should have done something months ago. They need to get tests to everyone. The CDC director needs to stop saying that people who have underlying vulnerabilities are not as important as all of us. Everyone has dignity. And some of her statements really were inartfully worded, and that's being charitable. So we really have to get masks, get testing, and get our act together on these issues, and then still understand how perilous the economy is and how challenging it is for working class Americans and for many people in our district. So with that, let me open it up to questions, because I know Zoom monologues can bore people, and I try not to go on too long.
Okay, Ro, thank you so much. Let me just switch into speaker view. So hopefully this works the way it's supposed to. And when I'm talking, they'll see me. And when you're talking, they'll see you. So one of the questions I had, and you did address it pretty well with what you just said, but what can we, you talked about the Build Back Better plan, but what tools does President Biden have that he hasn't used yet that we can use to basically bypass Manchin and Sinema to try and get some of our agenda through? And just as a side note, in my last semester, I was taking public opinion and voting, and the last question they asked us was, does Biden have a mandate? And all I kept thinking was, I don't want to hear about Republican obstruction, because I think the media has finally got it right this time. Like, the Democrats are obstructing from within because we've let like 1 or 2 senators hold our entire agenda captive. So even if Biden did have a mandate, he doesn't have the support there to push it through. So what tools do you think he still has that we can use to get it done?
Well, he clearly has a mandate on these policies. I mean, giving seniors dental, vision, and hearing calls at 70%, making bold investments in the climate, 60, 70%, universal childcare, 70%, universal preschool, 70%. So there's a mandate for them, but yes, it's frustrating, the filibuster Senate and the sense of a couple moderate folks holding out. And one, we need to continue to mobilize and elect more progressive senators and House members. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But Biden can do certain things. He has the executive order capability to forgive student debt. Look, you can't say you have the authority to delay student payments and to forgive interest payments and then say, I don't have the constitutional authority to forgive debt. Of course you do. Forgive at least 10,000. I'm for forgiving 50,000. Forgive at least 10,000. That would be very concrete. You could do it with a stroke of the pen. And force the Republicans to sue. Let the Republicans be the party going to the Supreme Court to take away debt relief. I mean, that would be foolhardy for the Republicans to do that. He can, through executive action, get a lot of funding in to set up new factories. I mean, through the Federal Financing Bank, and give the money to people who can set up factories for semiconductors, for auto industry, for electric vehicles, for electric building the smart grid in sustainable ways. He can do a lot of that through executive order. So there are things he needs legislation for, but there are things he can do through executive order, and he should.
Thank you, Ro. The second question, and also since we brought up voting rights, I did want to mention I had to read this book, One Person, No Vote.
Great book.
Carol Anderson. She also wrote White Rage. And if you can make it through it without getting super depressed, I had to like read 10 pages and put it down. It is an amazing capturing of how voting rights were attained and how the VRA has been gutted, and how that affected the 2016 and all the elections since then. So if voting rights is your jam, I do recommend this book. And then the next question, but not the last, that I have, Ro, is about January 6th. We totally saw a coup on our Capitol. And 1 year later, we're talking about the insurrection. We refer to it as Insurrection Day, but the president and Congress could actually declare it a national day, like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor Day. And the member that sent in this question actually wanted to refer, potentially calling it Defend Democracy Day. So how can we memorialize the January 6th and put it in the American mainstream as a day to remember that our democracy is fragile and insurrections are not cool?
I love that idea, and I think it's a brilliant idea. We should push for it to make it a federal holiday, to memorialize it, and maybe to memorialize it with as a democracy day or a deliberation day, where we all encourage people to get together and discuss democratic issues, civic engagement, participate in virtual or in-person town halls. Obviously, I think voting day should be a holiday, but this could be a way to say, let's honor democracy, that we work hard a lot of days a week, and one day can be to honor democracy, because that's what was at stake on January 6th. Capitol, as I understand it, hasn't been attacked since 1812. So it's not like this was a part of the course or these things happen. It has totally changed the complex of the Capitol. When you come to visit me, you'll see. I mean, it's like a fortress now. It used to be anyone could get in. So I think it's a great idea, and I'll pursue it with our caucus.
That would be wonderful. I was going to say we can make it like correspond. It's like a national get out the vote day, where like we all call
Yeah.
it. You re-register at your new address. The next question that I got, we're going to switch directions a little bit, and you'll have to excuse me. I was telling everyone before this meeting exploded, I've been sick all week.
Hope you're doing okay. Hope it's not COVID.
So I got tested for COVID, and my test results came back 6 days later inconclusive. So I have to go get tested again.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit. This question is actually about foreign policy. What are your thoughts on how the US can avoid an expensive and dangerous Cold War with China?
Well, I share that concern. I mean, we shouldn't be surrounding them with nuclear weapons as part of the posture. We shouldn't be having a defense budget. I was one of two people on the Armed Services Committee out of 59 that voted against a defense budget that is bigger than Trump's, that is bigger than any defense budget we've had since the Cold War, since the height of the Cold War. So we shouldn't be doing that. We should be engaged with them on climate. We should be engaged with them on issues of mutual concern against terrorism. We should be engaged with them to ratchet down some of the tension. So I think that we have to be clear that they can't invade Taiwan, that they can't steal intellectual property, that they can't take actions that are hurting Japan or South Korea. But we need to have dialogue and not replicate a Cold War.
Thank you. Hopefully that answered that question asker's question. Mandeep wanted to follow up about President Biden. Do you have any insight, any word from the grapevine on the Capitol about why he isn't flexing his power more to get things done?
I think they're very institutionally cautious. There are all these lawyers, and lawyers can always tell you 5 reasons why not to do something, and they don't think they have an airtight case. On student loans, I keep hearing the argument, well, the people who are working class and don't go to college will resent it. Well, first of all, it's not just for college, it's also for vocational education, any higher education. Second, I think people understand that we don't want a new generation saddled with $30,000, $40,000 of debt, and that they need some relief. So I don't think that this, and a lot of the people are from working class families. So I don't think this is somehow anti-working class. And the free college is not just free college, but free vocational education. So it doesn't distinguish against college versus people who want to get a 2-year degree or vocational education or training. I will say this, the height of the unemployment in the pandemic for college graduates was 8%. For those who were high school and didn't have any post-secondary education was nearly 20%. So the statistics are so clear that the more education, more training, the better.
Could I follow up with a small, thanks for that answer, Representative. Are there any executive actions he could take on the Voting Rights Act? I mean, he's been in the Senate a long time. He realizes that the Republican senators represent about 30% of the population, far minority, and we're not in good shape in the country. So is there anything more he can do that we could get him to do?
He could take actions in the voting rights to make sure that the Justice Department is enforcing the federal law. But the problem is with the Roberts Court having gutted the Voting Rights Act, he's really limited unless we reinstate some of those Voting Rights Act to give the Justice Department that authority. So when it comes to voting rights, I think there are some certain actions he can take. But if Congress doesn't act, genuinely his hands are more restricted.
Thank you, Ro. Annie would like to ask if there's any other important legislation coming up other than BBB, and I know you talked about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that we need to be paying attention to.
Important legislation, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got to do standalone legislation on expanding the child tax credit if BBB doesn't happen. And that's something we should be calling for and paying attention to. There's going to be the Innovation Competition Act that is massive investment in advanced manufacturing and clean technology. Those would be the two. And then, of course, I had the chair of the oil hearings, first time in the history of this country that the big oil CEOs all came before my committee. And we're going to be having follow-up hearings on that. So I would keep an eye out on them.
Yay, we love watching the oil barons get questions. Can I ask you a question about the clean technologies bill? I got really into carbon capture and storage recently. If you guys
I'm told it doesn't work commercially.
So in the Build Back Better Act, so right now there's a tax credit that for like every gigaton of carbon captured by a commercial manufacturer and then stored geologically, like reverse fracked back into the earth, they get like 35 or 50 cents per thing, and they're like, that's not enough to supply the technology. So in the Build Back Better Act, it actually goes up to 85 cents. But from the academia I read, the main issue about it is that a lot of the factories that produce carbon are not near a good geological storage location. So we would have to build pipelines to carry the carbon back to a fracking site and like reverse frack it back into the earth. But the point of my story was more that this is something that is actually we do have some working carbon capture in America, and they are saying they can't do more because they weren't going to get a big enough tax incentive. So in the Build Back Better Act, it went up to 85 cents. And do you think, though, that is more or less effective than a just straight carbon tax, where we're getting the money from them for polluting and being able to guarantee that we can put solutions in place?
Well, I think, CCS is a long way to go. My understanding is there are only 12 commercially viable plants in the entire country. And it's very hard, as once you capture the carbon, where to store it. It's not easy to store it in the ground. So I much rather, and I have a bill actually saying that for CCS, you shouldn't be giving these tax credits if it's used for enhanced oil recovery. Because what's happening is they're capturing the carbon, they're using it to pump more oil, and actually it's carbon positive. And we're giving tax credits for that. I mean, it's totally absurd that we're giving tax credit today for activities that are carbon positive. So I'm much more interested in the other parts of Build Back Better, methane fee, the massive investment in clean technology in an electric vehicle infrastructure, $500 billion, not what we need, but bigger than any investment in the history of this country. And I think we have to pass the climate bill. Even even if we lose and compromise on some other parts of Build Back Better, if we don't do this climate part, we are just digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole.
Okay, we have a couple questions left, and then we'll let you go because I'm sure it's very late where you are. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Anita would like to ask, how does Congress have any plan to fix the COVID testing situation?
We wrote a letter, Adam Schiff and I, Bernie, to the administration saying, why aren't we testing? Why don't you have federal centers have testing? Why don't you have testing at every Walgreens, at every CVS, at every grocery store, testing in mask. We've known this 2 years. We're frustrated in Congress, and Congress is pushing the administration. We're happy to appropriate the money. This is not a money issue. This is a logistical issue, and we need to push the administration to just get this done. I think there's been progress on masks.
Thank you, Rose. So the last question that I have before I let you go is, when are you running for president?
You're trying to get rid of me? I love my job, love my what I'm doing, and love what you're doing. I was actually talking to someone and saying, I think Bernie should go again in 24. I mean, we'll see. If we need a working class agenda. We need a working class commitment. And I'm always, of course, I've supported this president because the alternative of Trump is just, unfathomable. But if he is not running, then I think Bernie could do it again. But I am continuing to build with all of you for a situation where we finally have a progressive person win. I'm not concerned necessarily exactly who that progressive person is, but I'll tell you who I want. I want someone who's going to be clearly for Medicare for all, not ambiguous about it, clearly supports, for example, Ash Kalra's bill in the state. I want someone who's going to be clearly for free college. I want someone who's clearly going to be dental, vision, healthcare, clearly for Medicare negotiating on prescription drugs, clearly for bold climate policies, clearly for a $15 wage, and who's going to fight and mobilize for these policies. And that Bernie still has a huge following and ability to mobilize. Maybe there'll be others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
We appreciate having you always. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for being our voice in Congress. It's almost hard to believe when you look at our local politics that we get to have like an amazing progressive at the federal level. So,
well, it's because of you. You helped me get there, Kelsey. I still remember, and I keep fighting for these policies that you are.
Thank you. All right. So
thank you, everyone.
We are going to move into the forum part of our agenda. So I believe all the candidates are here. So I'm going to bring them onto the screen very quickly, review the base rules with you all. And then let me see, spotlight here. We have Jamal. And then let me see. I know Aisha's on here. I saw her. Here we go. Sorry, you guys, I'm just having some Zoom difficulties. For those of you who missed it earlier, I am sick. Okay, so everybody should now why won't it let me add a third person? That is terrible. I'm having some challenges getting Aisha on screen. I'm sorry, you guys. Oh, there she is. Oh, shit. Okay, Aisha's here. Add spotlight. There we go. Everybody is on your screens now. Okay. So just a reminder, you guys, I don't feel well. I've already promised all of the candidates that I am not, we're just going to have like a cool forum. I don't feel like mediating any cat fights tonight. I love you all dearly, but I feel terrible. So if you have any questions that you did not email me in advance as I asked, let's keep reminding you guys, please politely put them in the chat and I will pull them in. So welcome everybody. We have Lily May, the mayor of Fremont. We have Aisha Wahab, council member from Hayward, and Jamal Khan, who we actually don't know much about, but we're going to learn. I also want to state that Jim Canova is a candidate in this race as well. He did have a scheduling conflict. But we have met with him before. He ran for assembly district at the same time Alex Lee did. So we had met him in that forum, and I will be inviting him to one of our future meetings so that he can introduce himself to our club again as well. However, these are the three candidates I was able to get here tonight. We're so happy that they made time for this 1 hour forum. So I'm actually gonna do newcomers first and let Jamal introduce himself. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. And how many minutes do I have?
I normally cut you off at around 5 for the opening. I want to make sure you have lots of time to get yourself out there.
Okay, sure. So my name is Jamal Khan. I grew up right here in District 10. I attended local public K through 12 schools all the way through. And in my high school, there were a number of my classmates who were on free lunch or reduced price lunch. And I saw the difference it made in their studies for them to be able to focus when they had enough calories. And it never occurred to me at the time that one day I would work for the federal agency that administered the National School Lunch Program, the Summer Food Service Program, and other child nutrition programs. And I'm very proud that the California legislature was able to pass a bill that would cover all children. I then went to the University of California, Berkeley, where I studied economics, political science, and rhetoric, and I did a minor in global poverty and practice. I then attended Harvard Law School, where I served as the managing technical editor of the Human Rights Journal, and I was also the president of the Muslim Law Students Association. I have worked for Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo, and the Obama White House. I have also worked for Catherine Cortez Masto, who is the first Latina US Senator in American history. For the Obama administration, I worked on a number of its priorities, including raising the minimum wage, paid sick and family leave, voting rights, LGBT rights, gun violence prevention, tuition-free community college, universal pre-K, and the opioid crisis. And some of the items that were in my policy portfolio at that time are now fundamental priorities in my policy platform right now for state senate. And I have a number of items in my platform, but everything revolves around one main goal, which is fighting to lift our middle class until it is once again the envy of the world. When I was in DC, there was a mentor who said to me, if you go to the office of an elected official and you talk about your concerns, they will listen. And if you have money behind you, you can speak louder. And if you have votes behind you, you can speak even louder. That's the way that a democracy works. And the big challenge here is, how do you gain that kind of grassroots support and enthusiasm without making compromises to all the special interests who can sort of allow you to reach a large number of voters, especially in a district of this size. Being a candidate, I've seen what it's like to try to get an endorsement from the special interests. They send you a very long questionnaire with a lot of detailed policy questions, and you have to answer all of them in writing in a way that serves their interest to get their endorsement. That's how it works. And so that's why you have a lot of candidates who say all the right things, but when they get into office, nothing much seems to happen. And it's because their hands have been tied by the strings that are attached to the endorsements that propelled them into office in the first place. That's why our system has been broken for a long time. And I'm hoping to change that through an alternate approach that builds grassroots support among the voters who are the true leaders in our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamal, and welcome to our little club. Lily, I will pass the honor on to you to introduce yourself to us again.
Hi, it's wonderful to see everyone, and even though it's in the Zoom boxes, I wish I could be able to meet all of you in person. And I've had the opportunity to work with the Fund Progressives for many years. And I feel privileged to have had the opportunity to serve our city now over 5 different elections. And I am motivated, much like many other people, for something that was near and dear to my heart. I got involved as a mom who was active in the schools, and I think it's easy in many societies to complain about the issues, but it's much harder to get to work. And so I got involved with PTA and school site council, and was able to then have an opportunity later to serve 2 terms on the school board, on city, and then as now my second and final term as mayor. Some of the issues that I'm really hoping to address, and I think are at the forefront at this moment, include health and wellness, much like our Congress member had mentioned earlier, and I appreciate working with him on these focuses in terms of providing accessibility, whether it's COVID testing to all people, regardless of immigration status, regardless of insurance, and homelessness, where we've been focusing on many different prongs approach, whether it's things like opening our warming shelter, having a Clean Start mobile hygiene unit, addressing a homeless navigation center, and now moving to our safe parking and other policies and our Project Home Key hotels that we're looking at converting into the final issue, which I'd really like to focus on, which is housing. And we recognize that housing is so critical. And we have been fortunate as a city to have been able to meet our residential housing needs assessment. And we realize that that's not just one piece. It's not just building the types of housing, but also having the accessibility to the different types of housing available, such as senior housing, workforce housing, and also in our city's history, record numbers of low and affordable low-income housing. These are just some of the policies, including with my past work in education, that I hope to be able to replicate, not just here in the Fremont area or in the Bay Area, but to be able to effectuate on the state level. Seeing that some of how these policies work, and having been involved with Legislative Action Day and lobbying for my past almost 20 years, it's something that I've seen from many different perspectives as a community member, as a mom of 2 millennials, myself, who I have 2 made in Fremont, and then having seen a lot of the business perspectives too, in terms of making sure that we have different types of jobs available, and the connection, whether it's to vocational school, to working with labor and with others, to ensure that everyone has the opportunity. And now more than ever, when we try to work to build back, I'm hoping to partner with all of you and be able to represent the community. I'm humbled again to have been able to serve in 5 different capacities and elected to these offices as the first woman and first minority mayor, and to be one of the ones that be able to continue this legacy and partnership and building the pipeline also as we build to the future. And so thank you for the time today, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Lily. And last but never least, Aisha, go ahead and reintroduce yourself to everyone.
Definitely. Thank you. I first want to just thank you guys all for putting this together, and all of you guys who have joined. I know, one, it's through Zoom. So I know we're a little Zoom fatigued, but also just the mere fact that we can kind of share a little bit about our platform. So again, thank you. My name is Aisha Wahab. I'm the Hayward City Council member running for State Senate. I do want to kind of just talk a little bit about, my background and what I hope to do. I think a lot of you guys are familiar a little bit more with my background. My parents came as Afghan refugees to this country. They were definitely seeking political asylum, almost no different than what we see in the news today with the new arrivals. And, their goal to come to America was to start anew. And that dream was very much cut short when my father was murdered in New York City, a case that has still yet to be solved. And, I was very fortunate to be born in New York City. My sister and I ended up in foster care soon after my father was murdered. We became a ward of the state of New York as well as California. I lived with a wide variety of people, moved from home to home, family to family. I grew up living with Black people, Latinos, Asians, literally grew up going to church. And eventually, both my sister and I were adopted together, which is a very rare occurrence in the foster care system. With that being said, my home has always been this district. My parents lived in Fremont, and I went through public education, was very proud of the Fremont school system, was able to graduate and receive a master's in business from Cal State East Bay and an undergraduate degree from San Jose State. And with that said, less than 3% of foster youth obtain a college degree. So I'm very proud of the fact that both my sister and I both received a master's degree. With that, we genuinely believed, our parents taught us, the value of respect, dignity, hard work, and genuinely community service. My sister went on to become a social worker, and she works to take kids out of harmful situations. That has always been one of her passions. And my passion in community work was very much seeing how I can help on a different level. I served as a board member of several different nonprofits, right there in Fremont. I also, just became, the Alameda County Human Relations chair for a number of years. I served with some people who are on the call today, and genuinely was, working hard and hopefully getting to somewhere. And the Great Recession happened. My parents were small business owners. They had a business for almost over 20 years. And the first thing during a recession is when the economy tanks, retail tanks, right? We all are trying to save an extra dollar going out and so forth. When that happened, we had our family home foreclosed, and we were renting, and we were priced out of Fremont. And so we moved to Hayward. And in Hayward, it was one of the few cities that you move to right before you're going to move to a Tracy, a Mountain House, further out, especially during that time. And that's why so many people have moved out of Fremont, because of the cost of living. And, luckily, a lot of the work that I've done in Hayward, I worked with community. I saw, the Trump administration from day one was very disappointed at what I was seeing left and right. And I decided to run for Hayward City Council. I will say I did not have the support of the chamber, of fire, of police, of the city council. I was considered the outsider. And what ended up happening is that I was the top vote getter in that election, because people truly care about the issues more so than anything. And not only was I the top vote getter, but I was the youngest woman ever elected to Hayward City Council, and the first Afghan American woman elected to public office in the nation. I'm very proud of the work just to even get there. But on City Council, I genuinely pushed to make sure that housing was our primary focus. And within 6 months, we expanded affordable housing on so many different levels. Not only that, addressed public safety response to crimes and community needs, as well as we were the leaders in the region on COVID. Our COVID response was second to none. We were the first in the nation to have a free COVID testing site that so many other cities, including Fremont, copied and replicated in the city. Genuinely, I was the first also to introduce the eviction moratorium for both commercial and residential property, as well as within, this is my last point, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my last point, I was also the first to introduce, within weeks of the shelter-in-place ordinance, the resolution against Asian hate. And many other cities copied that, 10 months to a year later. So I want you to know that no one will work harder than myself for this district, my home district. And I genuinely do hope that our voice is heard in the Capitol, and you all, definitely consider me as the best candidate to represent this district. So thank you.
Thank you, Aisha, Lily, and Jamal. I appreciate having all of you here. So the first question that I want to ask, and I'm going to say that I just want to give a shout out to Assembly Member Alex Lee, who's on the call. He joined us in October, and he has 2 pieces of legislation our club strongly supports, and I'd like to hear where you guys fall on this. The first one is AB 1400, which is CalCare. That is basically to make healthcare our very own single payer right here in California. And then the second, I can't remember the number of it, but if Alex wants to throw it in the chat, it's basically to allow the state of California to become developers and build their own public housing. AB 387. Thank you, Alex Lee. So AB 387 and AB 1400 are legislation that is going to be going through the assembly and may reach the Senate during your tenure. That's top priority for this club. So Lily, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Assembly Member Alex Lee. It was nice to see you earlier today as out and about in the community. And we're fortunate to cross paths often. I think when it comes to the two legislations, I have not read all the details of them thoroughly, but I do believe in providing universal health care. I think that it is very important for accessibility. And there have been a lot of challenges in terms of this time period. And whether it's, I saw that firsthand when we talked about some of the vaccination, and in particular in our city, where there's a lot of immigrants, and in this district, where there's so many families who have people that are immigrants, I think that that's been a challenge to provide that access. And so I'm very supportive of that. And then again, regarding housing, I think there are many different ways. And one of the greatest challenges that people don't realize, having served on council over the years, both as a council member and mayor, is that when there's housing set for us in terms of arena numbers, it's not just about approving or permitting the housing, it's about the different ways that we have to finance and provide that. There's costs on materials, there's costs on labor, and there's different ways to address that. And we are one of the first in a district to probably have also, when we were doing our Habitat for Humanity housing, not be able to provide that and work through the developer financing to be able to use cap and trade to finance that, which is why the California Housing Development individual director came down to recognize that it was a unique way to address. The first part of that piece was low income housing, and the second part was actually workforce housing. So I'd be very supportive of understanding how we could have the state or others be able to help better finance and develop the housing that's needed for our communities.
Thank you so much, Mayor May. Mr. Khan, you can go next.
Okay, sure. With regard to those two bills, I support both of them. I support universal healthcare, single-payer health insurance in the long term. At the same time, I think we also have to keep in mind that, you know, there's what we would want, and then there's like, okay, what's the best way to get there? So if that bill's in front of me, absolutely, I'll vote for it. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of opposition, right? So it's like, if we cannot get that passed, what can we get past? You know, like what else what kind of incremental progress can we make? We know that Covered California, you know, it helps individuals afford healthcare. It's available to individuals making less than around $47,500 per year. We know that there's this middle gap. There's a middle segment of the population that makes more than the threshold, but not easily enough to sort of afford coverage. And so some counties have a supplemental program to help those folks. So for example, Santa Clara County's primary care access program is available to individuals who make less than $53,000. And there's a proposal that would double that income cap to a little over $100,000 to reflect the Bay Area's high cost of living, right? So if we, so one of my sort of things, like for example, so if Alex Lee's bill does not end up passing, I'll look at these kinds of options, like what can we do in Alameda County and Santa Clara County to explore how the state can help these ongoing efforts to reduce the number of uninsured in the East Bay and in the South Bay. So that's an important thing, that like to do it incrementally. Single payer is, I think that's the future for us. At the same time, it's important not to scare voters too much, because say, well, I have most of us have private insurance. What if we have to wait longer to see a doctor? What if it's chaotic? So it's like, okay, if we just keep raising the threshold for qualifying for Medi-Cal and for qualifying for some of these county programs to cover more of the uninsured, that way we can continue to cover more people and lower the number of uninsured, and at the same time, you know, do it in a way that it's in these like small digestible chunks, so that way voters don't get too alarmed. So that's the way I would go about it.
Okay, but you're cool on AB 387 social housing. I'll give you like another 30 seconds if you want to make any comments on that. Okay, sure. Yeah. So absolutely, I support that as well, and I think that, you know, one of the key things we need to look at is to reduce barriers to the construction of a new housing, and looking at these new options that will allow us to increase the supply of housing in our district. You know, there's always, when any effort to increase the supply of housing, there's always going to be some opposition from special interests and from the real estate developers and the companies. So it's like, how do we overcome that and make the people's voices heard? We were able to pass, you know, SB 9, which came into effect this year, which is going to do a lot to help increase the supply of housing. And I see Alex Lee's bill as another step in the right direction. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Aisha.
Well, yes, you know, in today's time with the economy, as well as, you know, the pandemic itself, we see the inequities in our community. At the end of the day, you know, we can't afford to think, can I afford healthcare? We all need it. So I'm very happy to see these bills come forward. I often say that the housing bill, for example, housing is a multi-pronged effort. You know, there's not a single policy that can address these huge institutions, industries, and problems in our community, both on a healthcare side as well as a housing side. That's the end all be all. You know, I'm very proud to have both the endorsement of Alex Lee as well as Ash Kalra, who have championed these two initiatives, right? You know, I do care about the details, and details really matter to me in a lot of policies. So, you know, if I am fortunate enough to be able to represent this district and this comes across my desk, I definitely will have, you know, my friends to talk to, Alex and Ash, and go into the details and see what's best for our community. And it's not just these two counties. It's not just Santa Clara and Alameda County, but we also have to think of the entire state. There are significant inequities that we have seen exacerbated by COVID. And we generally need to talk to all people as much as possible to understand the details and the nuance and how it affects them. So I'm very supportive of these two initiatives.
Thank you so much. So the next question that I have is about one of our favorite things to talk about as fun progressives, and that is democracy and money in fucking politics. Excuse my French. We, as the fun progressives, have been on a crusade against money in politics since our founding. We follow the good word of Mr. Bernie Sanders that, you know, you should not be accepting money as an elected that is going to present a conflict of interest for you when you are negotiating with private interests. And that is something that we see happening all the time. And it's been brought up in all of your answers, right? Institutional power, overcoming real estate developers, overcoming big insurance, big pharma to get the things that we need to the people. So the state Senate's going to be dealing with a lot of legislation, or could bring forward a lot of legislation regarding public financing of elections, regarding changing contribution limits. I mean, you guys are so lucky because you're regulated by our state contribution limits, but at the local level, many races have ridiculously high contribution limits that very much tilt the table. So when you're in the Senate, and on the democracy side, we are now a vote by mail state, and that changes, I think, the landscape of voting quite a bit. And people get flooded with, you know, nonsense mailers paid for by PACs, and they don't know how to find the money that contributed to this mailer, and it's a whole problem. So what would be your priority in safeguarding our democracy and making the way that we pay for campaigns fair when you are in the state Senate? And Jamal, I'll let you answer this one first.
Sure. One of the classes I took at when I was an undergrad at Berkeley was called California Politics. And so the professor invited a number of guest speakers. One of them was a state legislator. And it was one of the most memorable things he said was, I am the head of such and such committee in the state legislature because such and such interest group wanted me there. And because that interest group wanted him there, that's why he was there. That was why he was heading that committee. That's how the system is working right now. And make no mistake, I mean, you remember Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, there was a machine that had a lot of power behind the scenes. Those were all Democrats, right? So don't just assume that because Democrats have a super majority that, you know, that means everything's like fine. It's not like that in reality. I will not accept any corporate contributions. I will not accept any contributions from the oil and gas companies or from the utility companies or from the real estate developers. When it comes to contribution limits, it really says a lot that the contribution limits to politicians like myself and Lily and Aisha are indexed to inflation, but the minimum wage is not in so many states. It really says a lot about our system. And by the way, this doesn't even include all the independent expenditure committees. We're gonna see mailboxes that are gonna be flooded with mailers. There are gonna be some interest groups saying, vote for Lily, don't vote for Aisha. There are gonna be other interest groups saying, vote for Aisha, don't vote for Lily. And we're gonna see a lot of that. That's what I saw in the previous election cycle with other candidates. And I expect to see more of that. I absolutely support public financing of elections. I support reform, but I think there are much more fundamental issues because Citizens United made it very, very difficult to put a curb on the PACs and the super PACs. And so it's going to take a lot of concerted, genuine, overwhelming grassroots effort to make a difference there.
I was muted. Thank you so much. Aisha, you can go ahead and answer this one next.
Definitely. I do believe in deep campaign finance reform. The honest truth is, for example, this district is the most populous district in the state of California, right? But how do we as a candidate get our message across? We have to raise money, right? There's many different options from public financing, which I think on a local level has worked. You see it in Berkeley. You see a lot of good, young, talented individuals running for office because they have the ability to, and the system works for them. To your point, Kelsey, there are significant concerns, and Jamal raised a good point about IEs, right? IEs play a very large part, and you can only actually tell when an IE comes into play towards the end of an election, which is not fair to the residents that want to see what's going on and do a deep dive, and not fair to the candidates as well. And it's very misleading. So I do believe that there's a number of things that we need to do to make sure that good people can run for office, that all people can run for office, not just the wealthy, not just those with the affluence of time. I am very happy to have the endorsement of Ann Ravel, who is Obama's administration FEC chair. We've talked about this a lot. It's very difficult in regards to Citizens United to keep a significant amount of money out of elections, but there's a number of efforts that we'd like to kind of take a look at. Transparency is key, as well as we have foreign institutions really actually donating, and there's no way to track it, especially if businesses and so many other things are available to donate to a candidate, not just a human being. So that's a problem for us as a nation.
Thank you so much. Lily, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I've had the chance to run many different times, and I'd have to say that when I got started, it's certainly as a grassroots person and having served locally, I know how much there is a challenge if you're not part of the machine or part of the, I guess, the anointed. And having run in that situation so many times before, I've been very fortunate that I think that what really helped in those moments for financing in other areas was just to get out to people. I've stood in front of grocery stores, and I told people the first time I ran, my campaign strategy was the human chicken. And I was out there early in the morning at the BART stations, whether it's freezing, and talking to the transit riders and public transit and taxi drivers, to being standing outside of the ethnic grocery stores and out front of parks, and at back to school nights and open house nights. For me to serve, I realize that so many people say that it's to run is to represent the community. And in many of my elections, I've been outspent significantly multiple times over in this race. And so that, as many of the other fellow candidates have already mentioned, this is going to be a different race than in past, because while in the past, if you watch me for my elections, I usually lose about 15 to 20 pounds just surely walking the precincts due to the pandemic, due to the fact that this district is so much larger than my previous pond, I guess, in terms of Fremont. It requires a lot more expenditures. I will say that I am not going to be taking oil money. I'm not going to be taking certain types of PAC money, but I am looking forward to be able to get my messaging out. And it's very hard, whether you're running against a machine that is simply from business interest or from labor interests and other stuff. So it's sometimes a really challenge to get out there, but I've been so blessed, and I hope to be so able to continue to do so by just getting it out, by going through people and through the financing opportunities of getting the support of the community members themselves. And as we mentioned earlier, it's an incredible diaspora. And I am saddened sometimes when people make disingenuous claims last time, like in my previous elections, where somebody had expressed concerns with just because of somebody's ethnicity in their name, and saying that they felt that it could possibly be a reference of foreign interest and things too. I would hope that, especially in this moment of Asian hate and other areas, that we're able to see that, we're so fortunate to have such a diaspora of diversity and ethnic backgrounds and different business involvements, that we really think it's important to represent all the members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily, and congratulations, candidates. You're halfway through this forum. We have half an hour left. So I'm going to take a question from the chat. Lance Kwan asked a fantastic one. The state legislature is normally used as a testing grounds for progressive policies. What progressive legislation that's in the 2-year bill cycle would be your day one priority and why? So Aisha, I will let you start on this question.
Thank you. That's a great question. For me personally, I think that a COVID response is priority. COVID response in a lot of different ways. Even in the city of Hayward, I am genuinely looking to ensure that when the eviction moratorium is lifted across the state, which it has, that we don't have a significant foreclosure crisis. We are seeing that already. One of the things that are protecting all cities in Alameda County is that moratorium that was adopted from my moratorium by Supervisor Wilma Chan, may she rest in peace. And that is why the courts aren't taking a lot of the foreclosures or evictions, I should say. And I think that one of our biggest concerns is, people are actually in this district and through the state of California, they are behind on rent and mortgages. We need to ensure that people can keep their homes. Your home is the biggest investment you make in your life for your family and so much more. And we need to ensure that all people can have a roof over their head. That is one of my primary goals. And I genuinely want to support as many people as I can to make sure that they don't go through the same thing that my family went through.
Thank you. Lily, I'll put you in the middle on this one.
Sure. So I definitely agree that at this moment, when I think about COVID responsiveness, there's a lot of different ways that we've been able to address some of this. Some of it is on the healthcare access, and that's why we're one of the 6 cities of opportunity. And we're focusing on health equity and making sure that we have that as a cornerstone. We partnered with Washington Hospital to look at that, and not just physical health, but also mental health, which is a key cornerstone right now that we're seeing impacting so much of our community, whether it's our healthcare workers themselves, the frontline grocery store workers, our seniors, where they're seeing a big change, and then also especially on the education side with our youth. And so I think that those are all some of the critical areas that we need to be able to support. And so for me, the health and wellness, and then probably the other area would be education and workforce development, because the pace of which jobs are changing, some of the things that when we talk about accessibility, it's about providing those types of jobs and skills that are needed. And so I'm really proud last year that we had an ELF program, which is Earn and Learn Fremont, where we took 21 individuals impacted by COVID and were able to get them into jobs that were well paid and also had at the same time the opportunity to upskill. So that wasn't just a job for that moment, but it was something that really could shape and change their lives, and something that could be replicated across so many of the different companies and through different groups to ensure that we're giving the opportunity for people to better be able to pay their housing and also to be afford the jobs that they need to be able to build their future.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, you can go ahead and close us out on this question.
Sure. Yeah, and when it comes to COVID relief efforts, I would pay close attention to like what's happening with like federal funding and stimulus to help shore up the state and counties and cities, and see what would be needed to supplement that. And with regards to like the top priorities, one thing that comes up again and again in my conversations with voters has been basically the top 3 are affordable housing, homelessness, and public safety. Those are the top concerns on people's minds. And just to mention affordable housing, one of my top priorities will be to introduce legislation that imposes tight restrictions on huge opportunistic companies that snap up hundreds of residential homes with all cash payments and then rent them out at a fat profit, which deprives hardworking Bay Area families of the dream of home ownership. I'm going to cut down on that because it's completely unacceptable that we're seeing this kind of thing happening right in front of our own eyes. And by the way, they are hoping that there's going to be another recession, because if that happens, they're going to want to swoop in and buy all these assets, including even more homes at rock bottom prices. And then when the economy recovers, they'll have even better profits, moving forward. So it's a cycle. It happened after the Great Recession, and they're hoping for it to happen again so that they can take advantage again. Not if I'm in the state legislature. I will fight against that.
Thank you so much. So the next question that I have is more about the income inequality that we have in California, because we're all talking a lot about the things that we really need: healthcare and housing, public safety. These all come from places of economic insecurity. The governor announced that he had a ginormous surplus during a pandemic, and yet we are seeing across the state places are closing down. They're short staffed. Their staff is getting, sick with COVID and can't come in, and they're not able to open on days. We're having not just a worker shortage, but wage shortages. People are not getting what they need. So my question would be, with our surpluses, with everything we have going on, what is your plan to address the economic inequality in this state, which, by the way, is the biggest gap between the rich and the poor in the entire country? And so let's see, I think, Mr. Khan, it's your turn to go first.
Sure. So income inequality is one of the biggest challenges of our time. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is shrinking, and hardworking families are feeling squeezed. We already have inflation that has been caused by COVID. We've also seen triple digit, in some cases quadruple digit increases in the prices of things like homes, things like college tuition, and in other kinds of expenses, which are essentially needed to be the ticket to the middle class and to have home ownership and basically the American dream. And there are many debates about the government that center around whether it should be bigger or smaller. I think that government should be smarter, government should be lean and efficient, and government should accomplish more with less. So I think that the state government should do everything it can to make better use of each hard-earned taxpayer dollar. We're on track right now for a $31 billion surplus, and that's a lot of money. And it's imperative for it to be spent very wisely for things that will help working families, everything from paid family leave to subsidized childcare to universal pre-K to tuition-free community college. Those are the kinds of things that will help working folks and help them have a decent chance. And these are the kinds of things that the state government can help with. So those are things I'll focus on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Aisha, you can go next.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Generally, what is your plan? We have these surpluses. We don't have shit going on to help the working class. What are your plans and ideas to address the widening and most severe economic inequality in this country that happens in our state?
Definitely. I generally feel that one of my largest motivators and when I push policy is to balance power. And I think that there's a great imbalance in our society. I often talk about how this is not a left or right issue. This is a community issue. People need to be paid fairly, right? We have a growing disparity in this district alone, right? We have some of the wealthiest people literally in the nation, if not the world, living here in the Bay Area, as well as some of the most poorest people, right? Homelessness has grown. Some people spoke about labor interests, but the honest truth is that, for example, in the 1950s in California, union workers were about 40%. People were living a decent life. We had grandparents that were purchasing homes for, at that time, $30,000, whatever it is. I've heard, ridiculous numbers. And today, people, minimum wage is the same, right? Federally, right? $7.25 for so many years. In 1915, it was $5 an hour for if you worked at Ford, right? And we're only $2 ahead, almost 100 plus years later. These are problems. People need to be paid more. People need to be paid fairly. I am so proud of the fact that I pushed the city of Hayward to accelerate the minimum wage to $15 an hour for big businesses and $14 for small businesses and nonprofits. Our council actually pushed that there would be a delay in the minimum wage. And the honest truth is that we cannot hurt our most vulnerable working class people, our lowest paid employees. They are the backbone of our community and our society, and they deserve to be paid fairly. So I will continue to make sure that the state of California genuinely pushes to make sure that all Californians are paid fairly, equitably, And genuinely, I think that there's a lot more to do when we're talking about the balance of power of big industry versus, the worker. And you see that in Starbucks, you see that the fight in Amazon, you see that in so much. And I do believe strongly in unions. And I think that that is one of the reasons why so many Americans in our parents' and grandparents' generation were able to purchase their first home for their families. So this is an issue of economic inequality that is actually the core of our platform too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Lily, you can go ahead and close us out on this topic.
Sure. So I've had a chance to see firsthand how education really affects a lot of that accessibility. And I've had the opportunity to represent the ROP, where we partnered with many of our skills and labor training and providing those types of opportunities. And right now here in Fremont, when I work with some of the companies as they're looking for expansion, I'm looking for them not just to come and say we need jobs, but some of the companies that I've talked to specifically have not just offered well beyond the minimum wage, which we as a council also accelerated to $15 an hour a couple years ago. But we've also, the jobs that I'm looking at are between 25 and 27 with full health benefits are some of the things that I want to look at to ensure. We also believe that when we look at projects, whether it's housing, infrastructure, and others, I strongly believe in trying to support our local businesses. And we've used them to demonstrate in pilots. And we've also believed strongly in being able to give that types of jobs and opportunities. I also represent and serve on several different committees, such as East Bay Community Energy. And we believe in local hire. And we also believe in reinvesting in the community. And so we regularly, with the monies that comes through from that, we reinvest in our community, making sure that we select vendors and manufacturers and products that are here locally in our area, and that we provide constant support for different fostering of programs, whether it's educational outreach, health outreach, and wealth and benefits in the community. In our city, we are offering a unique offering, the Fremont Family Resource Center, which has been around 22 years, which connects community-based organizations. And so providing people that not just even for the accessibility to service, but wraparound services. So when we built things like our affordable housing projects or a housing navigation center, the reason why it works is that it's not just giving the housing, but it's giving all the other supportive services that are essential for people to be able to uplift. And that's some of the things that I hope to be able to continue to help address the inequities that we see. And as a child of immigrants my father came in the 1960s, in a period when there still was colored fountains, and how it was very different than what you see today to Chicago, and to see how, so many people have been able to move up. But that's also in partnership. This morning, I was speaking with the American Society of Indian Engineers, and we talked about it, how even in the Asian community, there is a wide gap in terms of the income that you see. And there's some that are doing so well. And one of the things I really appreciate in that discussion and conversation was the challenge for those who do have so much to also then to pay it forward and to help those and reinvest in the community. So it's something that I was really excited to see and hear, and better yet, be able to shape and continue to deliver. And so these are things that I've been able to work through my past 5 services. And that's why I have the partnership with Congressmember Ro Khanna, who has endorsed me. We worked on veterans programs and ensuring that they get back to work, and as well as with seniors and so many of those at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. If anybody else has questions, just PM them to me in the chat, because I'm on what'll probably be like my last one. And that is something we have not talked about yet, that the state actually plays a huge role in, and that is criminal justice reform. I happen to be an expert at this point in time. It won't last forever, but at least through this election cycle, I'll be an expert. And the state legislature has done a lot of really good things to try and ease the burden of the inequalities in our criminal justice system. For example, no cash bail, yet many places in California, there's still cash bail. We have a lot of work ahead of us as far as, oh God, what is it called? Where immunity for cops. and also over incarcerating people, having people in jail just waiting to be charged, or trying to make bail. So what are your ideas for criminal justice reform, especially as it pertains to holding the criminal justice system accountable to laws that are passed by the state legislature, and for creating policing models that provide public safety and do not harm the community, and specifically our Black, brown, and poor communities? And I think, Aisha, it's your turn to start.
Thank you. I shared with you guys very early on that justice is very important to what I believe is the responsibility of policymakers. I shared that my father was murdered and it still remains an unsolved case. And very often I do think, where's my justice? Where is my father's justice? So we must ensure that we focus on the rights of the victims as a priority when we do consider what is public safety. And the victims are not just the people that were, robbed or beaten or, God forbid, anything else, but it's also the victims of the circumstance that they live in. So I have consistently stated on Hayward City Council, I do believe in the enforcement of the law. But when we are talking about punishment, I do believe in restorative justice practices. I really genuinely want to see that people are getting rehabilitated, that people are getting their GEDs and their degrees and trying to better their life. And I don't necessarily believe that putting everybody in a box makes sense. We have to really see what the effect is in our community of that. Black and brown people have faced far more brutality than anybody. The data has shown it time and time again, city after city. And in the city of Hayward, we had 4 officer-involved shootings within 12 months. And we had, activists that wanted to abolish PD and activists that wanted to hire 1,000 officers. And the honest truth of the matter is that both don't necessarily make sense. And the truth of what they were asking for is to feel safe in our community. And what I did, I met with our Police Officers Association every other week. I went on ride-alongs, I went with the community groups, I wanted to understand exactly what the case is. And I developed a plan that basically removed mental health and homeless calls from PD and gave it to our paramedics, who are also our firefighters, because they have a hand in public safety. So when mental health and homeless calls come, that they are met with an individual that does not carry an armed weapon, right? They do not carry a gun. And our police officers can actually focus on the crime that's really being had in our communities. Robberies, God forbid, again, rapes, murders, things like that. The true crime and giving justice, right? So there's multiple different efforts here. And at the same time, as much as I believe that our police are to enforce the laws of our society, we cannot rely on them as social workers and therapists. And that is why, I want to highlight that out of our 911 calls, 61% are not even PD related. They're healthcare related and maintenance related. With that being said, I believe that nobody is above the law, even those that enforce the law. And I pushed for the independent investigation of all officer-involved shootings that result in a death, because accountability is important. These initiatives that I pushed passed unanimously on the City of Hayward's council and was largely supported by our public as well. It took out of the box thinking, and I think that is something I'm very much interested in doing in the state. And I do believe in talking to all parties and really getting to the root of what's the problem and how can we solve it to make everybody feel safe. Justice is important.
Thank you, Aisha. Lily, you're the sandwich on this question.
Sure. I guess I'm in the meat in the middle.
There you
So when it comes to providing reform, or at least revisiting and understanding how we can evolve policing, it's been something that, since there are so many budget cuts over the years to our mental health, that we've seen it really impact our communities, whether it's on the homelessness side or other areas. So that's why we as a city many years ago started working with the county in terms of the MET team. So we believed in having a social worker go out and trying to address a lot of these homeless opportunities. We also believe that it was important, though, to still have some of the police officers with them, because the fact that we've had others who were involved in these situations and trying to resolve them actually be physically assaulted. So I'm looking for the safety of the people that we're serving, as well as the safety of the people who are serving the community. So it's one that has worked well for us. And during this period of the pandemic, we were able to house over 70 individuals, working with our individual who's on that team. And in fact, it works so well that we're expanding it. And I know on the county, they're doing the Kahoot program, and that, you know, we as a city are also in the process right now of hiring someone. So if somebody would like to be in that service, it's important. The other area that we saw, and having been on the school board, that I think is so important when it comes to policing reform is that outreach. And so that's why we kept things like our summer school programs, that we kept things like our youth family services has a program to help divert them in the summer and to connect people to a better pathway in terms of resources. And I thought that was really critical for that. And then both at the state level and some of the policing discussions, and actually at the national level in policing reform, National League of Cities and U.S. Conference of Mayors have been covering these areas in policing reforms. And whether it's working with Jane Castor of Tampa or other mayors like Lori Lightfoot and others, we've been talking about how can we work on this to make this better. And we realize not that one city in itself has these solutions. I recognize in full cognizance there are a lot of still racial biases. Having been born in Chicago, having grown up in Philadelphia, I am really heartbroken at some of the biases of people and individuals. So it requires education on so many different fronts. But that's why I'm really proud that we were one of the first cities many years ago. We had one of the first Black women police officers. We had our first LGBTQ police chief, the first Black police chief recently. And that because of these types of efforts, we've been reaching out to the communities continually. And in fact, right now, if you're interested in learning more about our city, each of my council members will be making rounds with their town halls in their districts to introduce our new police chief. We realize that this is not one conversation. It's going to be a continual process. And again, like some of the other people have mentioned, it's not one size fits all. And how do we fit with our communities? But that's why we want to work on the legislative policies at the levels to encourage all these different options to be able to allow us to better address this within our communities. But absolutely, I'm a strong advocate for police reform. I'm also a strong advocate that no one should be allowed to just flaunt the laws. And if they've done something that's outside of that, to be able to prosecute and address those situations. But that's why we work within those legislative policies. But right now, also, I'm fully cognizant as one of the largest Asian communities that there is tremendous concern of safety. And that's the one thing that as I walk through the district from San Jose all the way up through Hayward and through all the different areas of the district, I've been hearing resonating. I was saddened deeply to work with a former assembly member to talk about crime. And the day that we had a town hall, that very place had been broken into the night before. And just this weekend, when I saw that I had 11 stores broken into in one area, I personally went out to talk to each of the homeowner, the business owners, and to understand what the concerns were, to see what we could work on together as a community to address these.
Thank you so much, Lily. Jamal, you can close us out on this question.
Sure. So we have a lot of families here in the Bay Area, and they want to feel safe. And voters have talked to me about crime like car theft and package theft and break-ins. We've seen the mass armed robberies from San Jose to Hayward to San Francisco. And we've even seen they're like subtle signs. Like I've noticed people just running red lights because they know that the chances of being pulled over are smaller. And they say that, at least in the South Bay where I live, they say you're not supposed to dial 911 unless it's life-threatening. But if you dial 311, it can take a long time for someone to show up. So we need police. We need good police work. At the same time, we also want police to be fair. So what I'll work on is promoting diversity efforts in the police force so that the demographics of the force reflects the demographics of the community that it serves. I will also push to secure funding and create a mandate for advanced de-escalation protocol training for all rank and file officers, so we don't have these George Floyd and other kinds of incidents. I will also push for transparency and disclosure for any kinds of disciplinary actions and criminal records by police officers, because some departments are notorious for trying to hide things like that. I will also introduce legislation to require all officer-involved shootings that result in a fatality to be investigated by the state attorney general. And I will also require body cams for police officers statewide, this is good for residents, and it's also good for police officers, because in some cases, a criminal may make a false accusation against a police officer, and a body cam footage could actually help to exonerate the officer, right? And I will also push for a different focus where police should not be expected to solve everything beyond their core function. So if an individual is having a mental health episode, the first responder should be someone who's a mental health professional rather than a police officer. I mean, that may not always be feasible, like if the person could potentially be armed, but the main focus is that, you know, police should not be required to solve everything. There may be other circumstances where a different first responder would be better suited for that situation. So these are some of the ideas I have for so that our residents feel safe from, you know, from criminals, and also feel safe when they're interacting with the police.
Thank you so much. So once I asked for questions, I got way more than you guys could probably answer, and we did not cover some very important topics, like public schools versus private schools versus charter schools and the state of our education system. We didn't talk a whole lot about the your environmental policies. So I encourage you to put those shit, I'm so sorry, you guys. I encourage you to talk about those topics in your closing. But there is one question that I really loved. So this is your last question. And if you can keep it around maybe 30 seconds. But when you get into the Senate, who is going to be your quote unquote squad? So what other state senators would you most look forward to working with? And Lily, I believe it's your turn to go first.
Sure. Well, having been oftentimes in situations where I'm walking into a quote unquote environment where I don't necessarily know my squad, it allows me the flexibility to recognize that everyone brings something to the table. And so I'd be looking at people who focus on the environmental area, people like Josh Becker and others who shared some of those ideas. We as a city have been recognized as being one of the largest cities in platinum level, focusing on our sustainability, and we're updating our climate action plan. And most recently, you know, trying to be able to dual purpose some of those areas, whether it's our fire stations where we have microgrids that showcase and highlight solar, as well as be able to then also be resilient and sustainable to respond to our community's needs. So I think that my squad would be everyone that's up there in terms of, you know, I think you don't get to choose your team. I always tell my children as a mom, you don't get to choose your team, but you have to work with everyone, and then you have to respect everyone and recognize that if you're going to get something done, you have to be able to work together. No one person does it by themselves. And having served on council, school board, and other areas, I will tell you that I voted with and against every single member of my school board, city council. And, you know, certainly I imagine that will be the case with the Senate. But I recognize, again, that we want something done, you have to pull it across the line together. And so that's what I see my future with working on that. And I look forward to that opportunity.
Thank you. Jamal, you are the meat of the sandwich on this question.
Sure. I read Obama's book, A Promised Land, a year ago, and he talks about how when he was in his state legislature in Illinois, the way it worked was that they would keep the voters distracted with hot button cultural issues like abortion and gay marriage, whereas the real deal making would happen behind the scenes on things that actually affected the bottom line for taxpayers. And so I will do whatever I can to move against that. I'm a big fan of former Senator Jim Beal's efforts to stand up to the health insurance companies and push for legislation that helps to enforce parity when it came to mental health and physical health services. He introduced that bill something like 4 times, and I think it was the 4th or 5th time when it finally passed, and he was able to overcome all the opposition from the special interests. And so I see that as an inspiration, and I'm going to try to be as tenacious as he was with that legislation.
Thank you so much. Aisha, you can close us out.
Definitely. No, I appreciate the question. You know, the honest truth is that my squad is going to be the constituents of this district. Honestly, even in Hayward, I've seen it where, you know, I may have an issue that, you know, my council colleagues not always agree on at the very beginning, but they come along. It's unanimous votes that I have pushed for housing, for public safety, for environment, for you name it. And my job is to get the job done for our constituents. And that is the only thing that I'm going to care about. It is not a left or right issue, but it's an issue for our community and what works best for them. So that is my squad.
Okay, I love all the non-specific answers. You guys are killing it. I was like, this is the moment to name drop. So with that, I will allow each of you, it's 8 o'clock right now, but everyone's normally cool to stay a few minutes over to hear y'all close. So a minute or two. And yeah, also, if you guys want to drop your info, your websites and stuff into the chat, feel free. And I'll send them out as well in our next newsletter when I also share the link to this recording that I upload on our YouTube channel. And if any of the candidates would like the raw video of this meeting for their own campaign purposes, just reach out to me. I'm cool to share in an editable format. So with that being said, Aisha, you opened last, so you will close first.
Okay. You got me there for a second. I had to think about what you just said. Yeah, so I generally do want everybody's support. I am about building coalitions. We have activists on your team. We have, lifelong Democrats. We have business owners. We have labor. I'm so proud to have the endorsement of Senator Wieckowski, who has represented this district. I'm so proud to have Senator Jim Bell's endorsement, as well as Senator Josh Becker, Senator Nancy Skinner, and so many others, including the entire Legislative Women's Caucus. All the women that serve in the Assembly and the Senate have endorsed our campaign. But more importantly, the people that have come and worked with us, the organizations, California Environmental Voters, NARAL Pro-Choice, and so many others that have endorsed our campaign really know that we are working to get a solution, to get things done. My track record proves that I get things done for our community first, and that is the most important thing. So I really hope that you all can learn a little bit more about our issues, inform us of the things that matter to you, and work on our campaign. And hopefully, we will win and make sure that we represent this district appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Jamal, since you opened first, you'll go in the middle for closing, so you can go ahead and go now.
Okay, sure. I am determined to be the most accessible candidate in this race. If you have any questions about anything I said in this forum, my personal cell phone number is 408-834-6991. My cell phone number is also on the front page of my website, www.votecon.com. And so that's a place for you to find out more about me. As I mentioned, my grassroots campaign is not taking any contributions from corporations or from some of these special interests. And my main goal that everything in my platform revolves around is fighting to lift our middle class so that it is once again the envy of the world. Thank you, and I look forward to being in touch with you.
Thank you so much. Lily, you have the privilege of closing out our meeting tonight.
Thank you. And I want to thank Fund Progressives and all the attendees and participants for joining us this evening. I still remember, this is my 6th race, so I still remember the first time that I ran. And I have to be honest that the opponents at that time had far more endorsements than I did. And I would say some of the things I'd share is much like I did all those other times, which is that I may not always have the love of all the people that are the electeds, but the reason that I ran is because I had the love for the people that I serve. And at that time, it was for the children. And that was something that resonated. But that being said, I also think that having served locally, that all politics, a lot of it starts local. And I'm really privileged to have the support of my mayors, of my council members, and the people that I've served with over the years, whether it's on legislative committees, whether it's on Ledge Action Days, riding up to the Sacramento with our fellow moms on the school buses, or walking through the communities. That's how I think it gets done. I am somebody who's always run in my past races, and I still stand by that. I cannot determine for you what is the best, because that, I think, resides in the choice of the voters themselves. But I will say to you that I'm very dedicated. And for those who have served and worked with me, will know that since the pandemic has started, I have worked every single day. And I feel that it's not something I do because I just want to serve. I do it because I love my community. And whether I continue to serve as an elected or serve my community in a different capacity, I don't think that would change in how I run and how I serve my life. And so I feel privileged that if the community chooses to have me be their representative, I will do that again gladly and with the same dedication and fervor that I've provided to all the past times I've run. And that if not, I'll find something else to serve. But I know that that's where my heart is. That's why I chose to step out of my corporate world in the past and to be able to choose this. I want to build a future and build back better, not just for myself, but for my children and for the next generation. And that's why I also believe strongly in succession planning. I believe in working that help others to make sure that they succeed. And I've worked with fellow candidates and fellow opponents in the past. And when things are done, I also believe that we move forward because that's the only way that we're going to be able to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so yeah, everybody, that concludes our State Senate Forum. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm sorry I was sick and half the questions I asked, just like halfway through them, I had a brain fart, so I'm so sorry. But I'm glad that everyone seemed to get the gist. I want to thank Mayor May, Councilmember Wahab, and Mr. Khan for joining us this evening. This recording will be available on YouTube within the next couple of days. And please remember to register for our February DA Forum, which is going to be very hot, very spicy. And I look forward to seeing all of you then. Have a really, really wonderful night. And I look forward to seeing you all again next month.
Feel better soon, Kelsey.
Thank you so much.
Good job, Kelsey.
Thank you
Good
guys.
job, Kelsey. Thank you. Feel better soon.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all. Thank you to all the opponents who came tonight.
Okay. And end.